Hi, this is David Miller, and I'm here with the seventh in a series of mini-lectures on Charles Dickens's Great Expectations. The title of this mini-lecture is Coming of Age. You remember last time we covered the first movement of Volume 2. Today we're going to cover the second and third movements, as promised, and wind up our discussion of Volume 2. The second movement of Volume 2 is launched out of the first, for when Joe Gargery comes to dinner, he brings a note from Miss Havisham saying that Estella has come back to Satis House. Pip's return to see Estella begins a series of back-and-forth movements between London and Satis House, in which Pip avoids visiting Joe and Biddy, and develops his relationship with Estella, who soon takes up residence in London. Of the many patterns that develop in these chapters, perhaps the most interesting is the way the action repeats the structure of Volume 1 on a smaller scale. Did you notice this? Each time Pip sees Estella, their meeting is preceded by a reminder of Magwitch. First, there are the convicts riding on the coach when he goes to visit Satis House. And then there is the tour of Newgate Prison just before he meets Estella's coach in London. Each time, we see Pip retracing the path from his guilty secret to his social shame, and then to the combination of social ambition and hopeless love that arise from it. This movement culminates in Pip's return home for the funeral of his sister. It's the first time he's seen Joe since their dinner together in Chapter 8, and the scenes are clearly parallel. This return seals the hypocrisy of Pip's behavior, for although Biddy never criticizes him for avoiding Joe, she does remain silent when he declares that he will come often. And Pip, on the defensive precisely because he knows he's in the wrong, accuses Biddy of a very bad side of human nature. This pompous expression sounds like someone we know, for at this moment Pip is being a complete Pumblechook. The closing movement of Volume 3 is half the length of the first two, 4 chapters instead of 8. Pip, at age 21, has his coming-of-age interview with Mr. Jaggers, only to find that he is still not to know the identity of his benefactor. He does, however, come into a larger share of income, and performs what we will later recognize as his only good deed, helping secretly to buy Herbert into a partnership with a trading company. This action harks back to the pity he once felt for Magwitch. It was that pity, I said, which turned the stolen food from a theft into a gift. The action takes place, remember, on Christmas Day, and the food Pip brings had partly been intended for the Gargerys' Christmas dinner. This gift to Herbert is one of the first signs in the plot that Pip is beginning not simply to repeat the pattern of the past, but to work his way back through it and recover the truth. He will soon confront this truth directly in what he himself calls the turning point of my life. This turning point is presented both literally and symbolically as a return from the distant past. It is literally such a return, of course, because after 16 years, Magwitch turns up unannounced one night at Pip's apartment. It is symbolically such a return because it shatters all the illusions Pip has been building up about his great expectations and their connection through Miss Havisham to Estella, taking him back instead to Christmas Day in that churchyard on the marshes, and to the gift of compassion from which his fortunes truly originate. By a stroke of genius, Dickens prepares us for this turning point with a highly unusual simile. Let's take a look. In the Eastern story, the heavy slab that was to fall on the bed of state in the flush of conquest was slowly wrought out of the quarry. The tunnel for the rope to hold it in its place was slowly carried through the leagues of rock. The slab was slowly raised and fitted in the roof. The rope was rove to it and slowly taken through the miles of hollow to the great iron ring. all being made ready with much labor. And the hour come, the Sultan was aroused in the dead of night, and the sharpened axe that was to sever the rope from the great iron ring was placed in his hand, and he struck with it, and the rope parted and rushed away, and the ceiling fell. So, in my case, all the work near and afar that tended to the end had been accomplished, and in an instant the blow was struck, and the roof of my stronghold dropped upon me. This passage is based on one of the author's own favorite childhood stories, The Enchanters, or Miznar, the Sultan of India, from a book Dickens actually owned as a small boy called Tales of the Genie. This isn't the only place in Great Expectations where Dickens is drawing on his childhood memories to create Pip's experience, but it's the most striking. The passage is remarkable in many ways. There is the imagery of underground tunnels and ropes, so suggestive of the unconscious mind with its dark recesses and hidden operations. There is the way the sentences, in their very shape and rhythm, create a sense of delay, of long preparation and building suspense, leading up to the dramatic awakening in the dead of night, and finally the collapse, which conveys Pip's sense that his whole life has caved in. There is the irony, too, that he is crushed by his own stronghold, the expectations that had been the source of his strength and security. And all of this, appropriately, returns to us as readers out of the distant literary past, a memory from a child's storybook resurfacing in the language and imagery of an adult novel. This passage illustrates perfectly what modern criticism refers to as the return of the repressed. In this way, it foreshadows the task that now faces Pip, which is to go back and recover the disavowed truth of his own past. In terms of the plot, as I've said, this truth will turn out to be an unsuspected connection between the histories of Magwitch, Estella, and Miss Havisham. In terms of Pip's character, the deeper conflict between guilt and pity that underlies his adult sense of shame, ambition, and hopeless love. Next time, we'll see how Pip works through this task in Volume 3.